For over 4 decades, our guests tonight continue to be among the most successful and high-profile musicians in the Los Angeles music community. It would take me the rest of the evening, and this is no lie, to list their credits. Suffice it to say, they've each played on thousands, literally thousands of sessions, recording some of the best-loved and most iconic albums with artists from Warren Zevon to Carole King, James Taylor to Linda Ronstadt, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young to Jackson Browne, Don Henley, Stevie Nicks. I could go on and on. Not only are they great musicians, they're also successful songwriters and producers. And in a rare treat for all of us this evening, they're here to chat about their remarkable careers, the music scenes in which they grew up and nurtured their careers, and perform as a band on their own. Would you please welcome Steve Postell, Waddy Wachtel, Danny Kortchmar, Leland Sklar, Russ Kunkel, the immediate family of band. We got seats, we got microphones. We're good to go. Thank you, each of you, for being here. This is very special, and we're very, very pleased that you guys took the time. Let's just kind of start with the here and now. In terms of this aggregation, when did this come together? The immediate family band. How did this all happen?
Me?
Yeah. Don't be shy.
I was approached, as Lee says, I was the problem. What happened was I was approached to do an album from a Japanese label. And they said, could you make an album of your tunes? And I said, sure. And my first thought was to collect these guys to do it, but of course they're all so busy that, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And amazingly, everyone was available, everyone came down, and we made it work. Steve and I did a lot of pre-production, and we were very prepared, and Jackson Browne basically gave us free studio time to do this, and him being an incredibly generous individual that he is. And we got down and we just started rocking, and it was just like falling off a log. All of us played together, as Scott pointed out, for many, many, many years, and there's not a lot of conversation. We know what to do. Everyone knows what to do, and there's a telepathy that goes on instantly. And so we just put it together, and it was an incredible experience, and we all loved it. And that's when we decided, well, if we can gig, let's gig.
Yeah.
So we took it from there.
I'm wondering, it strikes me that this is something like a great sports team. Pick your sport, whether it's soccer, football, basketball, whatever. You guys all know your moves. You all know what you do so well. When you get in the studio, how much discussion is there, or is it just getting down to work?
Very little discussion. We don't have to say a lot. Everyone knows what to do. Also, you don't want to tell Lee what to do because he gets really angry. You don't have to arouse him. So basically, it was like falling off. Everyone knew what to do. There was charts. Steve had written out charts to make it easy for us to learn the stuff, for the fellas to learn.
Right.
We don't need these, by the way. Because it's doing all the talking.
Yeah.
That's as it should be.
In terms of the repertoire, what was the repertoire? You guys writing songs? You choosing covers?
On this particular album, it was all my tunes because I was the one.
Oh, right, because they were the ones who contacted you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I must say that subsequent to that, we are now all writing tunes together in various combinations together. And the next thing we do is going to be all new originals.
Right. So the record came out in Japan. Am I right?
Yeah.
And the record is called.
The record's called Danny Kortchmar and the Immediate Family, but for now it's just going to be Immediate Family.
Yeah. But you're redoing something for the U.S. Is that the idea?
We're gonna we're working on how to structure it, whether it's going to be that record or part of that record, because we did four new tunes.
Yeah.
Of Danny's on that record, and so we may release that record as it is here, but we're more likely going to do a new record with some of that material and new songs we're all writing. The band now is Waddy, myself, and Danny all sing, and it's really a 5-person band.
Yeah.
Everybody's involved.
Yeah.
And I think the record that comes out here will reflect that.
Yeah. And tour? Take it on tour?
Just came back.
Well, you were in Japan, I know.
Yeah.
How did that go, by the way?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah, we got to do 2 shows a night and 1 festival show at the end of it, and it's remarkable to after having been there so many different times with so many different artists to go there without backing up an artist and be received the way we were, just doing our own music. Even though most of it was Kuch's music, but still, but we were doing a lot of the original compositions then, so it was great. It was a fantastic time.
We were kind of joking that we're like the ultimate cover band. Everything we did, we've either written, produced, or played on.
Or played on.
For other people, and now we're actually standing in front going, who's not there?
You're the guys in front.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works out.
Russ and I are still in the back.
So,
As it should be at that
And
way.
we're gonna stay
all
there.
right. So you know what? That's the perfect segue, because I want to roll the videotape back a little bit and talk about kind of where you guys came from and the scene that you guys grew up in. And Lee, you and Russ met, if I'm not mistaken, in 1968. Am I fairly accurate?
Sounds right.
Yeah, actually, you were
Lee remembers.
in a band called Things to Come.
Right.
And I was in a band called Wolfgang. It was either Wolfgang or Little John Farm, I don't remember, but we were actually on the same bill.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing Russ, I think you were wearing Speedos. maybe my mind is gone. No, but we kind of go back, but actually it was with James Taylor that was really the catalyst for all of us to come together.
Yeah, I mean, but before we get to James, Danny, there was the city. Tell us about the city and who was in that band.
Well, the city was Lou Adler's idea. He wanted Carole King to make an album. Carole was too bashful and shy and too insecure at that point as a performer to be the one. So she wanted it to be in a band situation. And so it was Charlie Larkey on bass, myself, and Carole. Carole wrote all the tunes with various people, including Jerry Goffin and Tony Stern. And the drummer was Jim Gordon, fantastic Jim Gordon. And my memory of it was, this is the first album I played on all the way through, the first full album that I'd ever done. I could not believe I was in the studio with Lou, one of the great producers ever.
Yes.
And with Jim on drums, it was heaven. And I'll never forget it. And I learned a tremendous amount just from.
Yeah, well, talk a little bit about Lou Adler, because we've done a bunch of things with Lou here. We did a Monterey Pop 50th anniversary exhibit. The Cheech and Chong exhibit we have upstairs is very much, he's very much involved in that. Sometimes I think he does not get the credit he deserves for the career that he's had.
Yeah.
So tell me what did you learn from working with him?
Well, how to roll a really good joint was one of the
It's legal now. It's legal.
He would come around each say like 2 or 3 things to each of us. That was very laconic, very laid back, great presence, very much in control. He was the coolest cat I'd ever seen in my life. And just
He
the
still
way he
is.
dressed and the way he looked, it's just his presentation, his demeanor. What a cool cat, and he still is, as everyone knows.
Yeah. And there's a connection again with James Taylor, but through Bugs Pemberton,
Right.
and if I'm not mistaken, John Fishbach.
Right. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, when I was in this group Wolfgang at the end of the 60s, our drummer was Bugs Pemberton, who was actually, he had come from London. He was in Jackie Lomax and the Undertakers, who were kind of rivals to the Beatles at that time in London. And he had a very close friend named John Fishbach, who owned Crystal Recording Studios in town, and he did all of the early Stevie Wonder records. And John Fishbach would come to our rehearsals. We were up in Sunland, we had a house up there, and we'd hang out, and one day he brought one of his friends with him, and it turned out to be James Taylor, who was hanging out at our rehearsals. And this was, James had just gotten back from London at this point, and this was just before he broke here. And that was kind of through the back door how I ended up with James, was through Fishbach, through Bugs. So it gets very convoluted at times.
Well, it just shows that so much of the music community, particularly coming out of the late '60s into the '70s, were so it was a very small community.
Yeah.
It was a very small community of people. But you did not. Speaking about your history in particular, you did not necessarily start out as a bass player. Am I right about
Well, I
that?
started as a pianist,
Yeah.
as a classical pianist. And when I was 12 years old, I went into junior high school thinking I was going to be the piano player. And it was at Birmingham out in the valley. And go Braves, except that now it's Patriots because it's going to be politically correct. but we won't get into that or I'll be thrown off Facebook again. But it's one of those things. I went in junior high school and I said, I'm here, your pianist is here. And Ted Lynn said, we got 50 kids that play piano, we need a string bass player. And he pulled this old blonde K upright out of the back room and set it up against me, and I plucked one note and felt that vibration and said, sold, done. Never looked back. I just fell in love with bass at that point.
Fantastic. Waddy, you moved to Los Angeles also in 1968. But before, I have to ask you about this. You grew up with a guy whose name was Leslie Weinstein, now known as Leslie West. Leslie West, the great guitarist and songwriter from the
We
band.
lived in the same building that my brother and my father and I lived in, and I heard some not great guitar playing one day when I was doing what I normally do, which was being truant from school, and I kind of went up through all the floors in this building till I came upon the right apartment, and I banged on the door, and this guy opens the door, and I went, "Are you playing guitar in here?" He goes, "Yeah." Leslie's got that voice. Yeah. I said, "Well, my name's Waddy Wachtel, and I can help you. You need help, man."
Age? This is
About 17, maybe.
Yeah.
I would say 17. And I said, I've been playing since I was 9. You need help, I can help you. So we spent a lot of time together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a little side part of the discussion, but I have to ask you about this. If I understand correctly, you guys saw the Beatles at the Paramount Theater. Am I right about that?
That's very true, yeah. Leslie and I.
What's the memory of that? Do you have a memory of that show?
Yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, we stood there on the left loge, which is the lower balcony, hanging right over the stage, looking at them and wishing you could hear them because there was so much screaming in the house. You could barely hear anything, but every once in a while you'd hear a little burst of music, and it was incredible.
Yeah,
It was incredible.
amazing. Somehow, the Cowsills figure in to your getting out
They
here.
do indeed, yeah.
Explain.
Well, I took the band that I had, we went up to Newport, Rhode Island, which is where they hail from, and someone said, "Have you heard the Cowsills?" And at that point I just said, "What is a Cowsill?" I never heard a word like that, much less there was a name. I went, "What kind of name is that?" And it was, at that point, it was just the four boys, Billy, Barry, John, and Bobby. And they were remarkable. They were standing at this little, it was a bar in this hotel, and they would play there every night, and they did Beatles, that's all they did, and they sounded exactly like the Beatles.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. And literally, John and Barry were like 10 and 11 years old, and they were fantastic.
Yeah.
And their alcoholic father was someone I kept having thrown out of the club I worked in, because I didn't know who he was, I didn't care who he was just an obnoxious guy. And all of a sudden someone said, "Well, the Cowsill's father went, you gotta be kidding me." And I went, "No." And he wanted to manage me, and I'm going, "Man, don't even talk to me. Stay away from me. I've thrown you out of this club like 10 times already." And he says, "Well, our kids are gonna make it." I said, "Yeah, well, when you get $1 million together, bud, come talk to me." And then about 8 months, 9 months go by, and I'm now with my band up in Vermont, which is getting towards the end of the world. There's not much further north you can go. And it's the dead of winter, and I got a call from the club owner who used to help me throw Bud out of the club. and he said, "Hey, Waddy," he got that New England accent.
Yeah.
"Hi, Waddy, it's Dave." I went, "What are you doing, man?" He goes, "I'm working for Bud now." I went, "What?" He goes, oh man, I'm telling you, man, he's got a lot of money now. And he still wants to sign you. And Bud got on the phone, he goes, we're coming up to see you. And, you're coming up here? Yep, we're driving up tomorrow. And it was a total blizzard. And they made a 6-hour drive and came up and they heard the band. And I sat down with Bud and he goes, band sounds good, man. Band sounds good. I got the $1 million now. You want to come with me? I went, yep, let's go.
Russ's son mixed the record. And so Russ's son invited me to the Troubadour to see the reunion show and introduced me to Danny. And it just, then I guess that I knew everybody.
Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, you're part of the family. Lee, when you were kind of coming into the community, it was around the time that the Wrecking Crew was breaking up.
Well, they never really broke up. It's just their
fading.
time was
Fading.
waning a little.
And I'm wondering, is it your sense that kind of a baton was being passed? Did you feel that way?
Not at the time, but in retrospect, it felt a little like that. I was in a band in 1967 called Group Therapy. and
How much do I love that?
And Mike Post was our producer, and at the time he was the musical director on the Andy Williams show.
Mm-hmm.
So we went into United Studio A to do our record with him, but we weren't allowed to play on it. The Wrecking Crew played on it, and that was the first time I'd ever really been in the studio. And I'm sitting in there looking through the window at Hal Blaine and Carole King and Mike Dacey and Mike Rubini and Mike Melvoin. And Jim Gordon was the percussionist, the new young kid in town. And I thought, I'll never be part of this. This is an amazing thing. And 3 years later, I was working with these guys every day. And there was a change that was happening in LA at that point with singer-songwriters. When James hit, it dramatically changed the music scene. And those guys were on some of those records, but for the most part, I mean, when you listen to some Bread records and stuff, some of those guys are on those records. But certainly towards the end of the 60s, with all the groups, Mamas and Papas, the Association, all those groups, was those guys. Yeah. And I look at all them as my mentors. I don't know how much time we have. I have a great Tedesco story. I'm sure you guys have heard of Tommy Tedesco.
Please tell it.
Okay.
Please tell it.
Tommy
We
Tedesco.
had his son here with the Wrecking Crew movie. Yeah, with the Wrecking Crew movie.
Yeah, which is, if you've never seen the Wrecking Crew movie, see it. It is absolutely a remarkable piece of history. But I was doing a session. Universal Studios used to have a studio on the lot, and we did all the Universal shows there. And we had baffles that were about this high, so we all looked kind of like Kilroy sitting there. You'd see about this much of us. And I'm sitting next to Tedesco, and the conductor's across the room. It's a pretty good-sized orchestra. And he goes, Tommy, I'd really like to hear maybe mandolin on this one. So Tommy goes, okay, reaches down, picks up his mandolin, starts playing. He goes, no, that's not it. He goes through about a half a dozen instruments trying to figure out what he wants to hear. And Tommy just keeps bending down and picking up another instrument. And I'm sitting here just crapping my pants, dying, because Tommy only had his acoustic guitar and he just kept bending over and sitting back up. But he was so gifted, he could play in all these positions and it sounded different. And so they finally settled on what they wanted to hear. And I looked at him, I said, I just learned more in 5 minutes how this business works than I did all my years of schooling. And so immediately after that, I went home and took my bass and I drilled a hole in it and stuck a switch in the hole that I call my producer switch, so that when I'm working with a producer who says, I want to hear something a little more shimmery, I have no idea what that means, but if he sees me flip a switch, then you gotta make sure they see it flip the switch. And then you just change your hand position a little bit, but there were no wires or anything going to the switch. It was just a receiver. That's my Wrecking Crew. And
Danny and Lee, very much associated with James Taylor and singer-songwriter or whatever. And Waddy, as you're kind of coming along here, you're seeing these guys' names, particularly Danny's name, on albums and liner notes or whatever. And what are you thinking at this time about
Well,
him?
I'm thinking, who is this guy, Cooch? And how come he's getting all this work, and why can't I get going in this business? And then I wound up on a session for Bobby Womack with Leland. This is probably 1970, I would guess. And so we finally met, and we dug each other enough to talk to each other anyway. And shortly after that,
That's enough.
there was one of them. And then I was pulling into Studio Instrument Rentals one day in my 57 Chevy, and out of the driveway comes Russ Kunkel in his 57 Chevy. And we looked at each other, and he goes, "You're Waddy, right?" I went, "Yeah, are you Russ?" He goes, "Yeah, we'll be seeing a lot of each other." And he drove off, I went in, and then a few days later, thanks to Nick Benet, like you said about Nick, I played for, he invited David Foster down to a session. I was doing a lot of sessions for Nick. A lot of folk records and a lot of acoustic stuff. And Nick Benet said to me, "It's time." He called me into his office, and I went, "What's the matter?" He goes, "It's time for you to move on, man." And I thought he meant I was being fired. I went, "What did I do? What's wrong?" He goes, No. You're better than what we're doing here. It's time you moved on to better stuff." So I've invited this new piano player named David Foster. He's coming down tonight to play with us, and I'm specifically brought him down because I want to hear you play. So bring your electric rig tonight and play. I want you to play slide and play electric guitar. I want him to hear you. And so I met Dave, and we played a bunch of songs on this record. And about 2 days later, I got the call to come from Lou Adler's office, and it was a Tim Curry record. A record for Tim Curry, and that's where Danny. So it was Russell and Leland, and there's Cooch finally. So the two of us met, and as all the animosity I had for who is this guy Cooch? Why is he playing all these records? We loved each other the second we met.
Yeah.
You know, reggae. All we could talk about was the reggae tunes we were in love with, and we've been just going at it since then. Really, that's how it started.
We talked about Lou Adler. There's another producer guy who was kind of, you know, also central to a number of you, Peter Asher. Tell me about the connection with Peter Asher and working with him.
Who are you talking to?
Dan.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, Peter Asher is heavily responsible for majorly responsible for all of our successes. And one of the main reasons was that he put our names on the albums. Now, unfortunately for the wrecking crew, who were all brilliant, as Leland was pointing out, they were never credited on their records. We were. Peter had our names right on there. So this new singer-songwriter sound, which of course, that was an expression made up, that term was made up by critics. None of us ever used that term. But it turns out that became a style, and we were identified, the three of us were identified with that style because Peter had was great enough to put our names on the record. Also, Peter's a brilliant producer. He put us all together. Great producer and still a wonderful friend of all of us.
And a great guy. We've had him here, but you know, that was an amazing time in music here in Los Angeles. You know, whether it was, you know, James Taylor, Jackson Browne, Carole King, Linda Ronstadt. I mean, it goes on. Is there a way for you guys to describe what a typical day in those days was like for you?
Well, I think it was a little different for all of us, but Lee, why don't you tell them what the day is like for you? You might not want to hear this, but
No, I mean, it was a remarkable, kind of like a golden age for this. I remember, I mean, the one thing I was kind of anal about is I've saved all my date books. And when I look back in that period, it's just black with stuff. I mean, we were doing 4 dates a day, sometimes 5 dates a day. And you could work 6 days a week and just take a day off. It's hard on your family and everybody, right? But it was really an aggressive time, and everybody was being signed. So there was lots of work, where now it's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah.
But we would be doing sessions, and you'd finish a session and walk out into the hallway, and somebody would be across the hall starting, and they go, "What are you doing now?" And so we just finished. They go, "Come on," you'd roll your gear across the hall to the other room, and you'd be doing something. I mean, I met so many people, worked with guys like Herbie Hancock, just because of finding them in a hallway and saying, you know, "You want to come play on our session?" And it was a really aggressive time musically, and it was more work than you could literally handle.
But there was a community sense.
Oh, absolutely.
It was not competitiveness
There
necessarily.
was a lot of hang.
It was
Yeah.
totally amazingly open. It was, I had just gotten here and I walked in. It was on the equal to like Liverpool for the Beatles. At that time, there was this explosion of all these artists, and they all knew each other, and they all wrote songs for each other, or anything. Everyone was helping each other do stuff. And that's how it was when I walked into this scene. It was amazing. You mentioned Linda Jackson.
Yeah.
James was going. Warren and I came up together through the Everly Brothers. Little Feat was going. It was like, and the Birds were killing. I met David Crosby, and a couple days after I met him, he called me and said, "Let me ask you something. What would you think if I was to put a band together with Stephen Stills and Graham Nash?" And I'm like, "Come on, what do I think? I don't have to think about it. It'll be amazing. It'll be the best band ever." And that's how it was. And you'd be on a session, like Lee just said, and you'd walk out into the hall, and someone said, "Oh, you're here. Come on in here and play." When I was working with Warren, we'd have Don Henley and Glenn Frey would stop by for a drink and be hanging out. "Oh, you need a vocal on this? You need some harmony on that? Anything?" And that's how it was. And you'd call Linda and say, "Listen, I need a background punch. I'll be down in 10 minutes." It was amazing. Jennifer Warnes and Linda and I sang the backgrounds on Excitable Boy. Because I sat there, I said, "I need a Beach Boy harmony part on this." "Linda, what are you doing?" "Nothing. What's up?" "I need a part." She goes, "Call Jennifer. We'll be right down." It was amazing. And that's how it was. It was completely.
I want to come back to Warren and Excitable Boy in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit about being session musicians and what the qualities you have to have, because it's, if you don't know how to get along with people, if you're not a good collaborator, I don't think anybody's going to call you back. So talk a little bit about, because God knows there were plenty of challenging people around, and at that time, what from your perspective, what makes a good collaborator? What makes a good studio musician?
Well, you have to remember that at that period of time, the artists that we had the opportunity to work with were James Taylor, Carole King, Jackson Browne. Just those three names, the incredible body of work that those people wrote during that period of time, and Joni Mitchell, and we serendipitously were there to play on those songs. And you can't compare that to just any songwriter or any session. I mean, we were incredibly fortunate to be there at that point in time. And the first time we heard "You've Got a Friend," I mean, that's a pretty amazing song.
Yeah.
So I think, I know certainly what I thought was, well, you better play something fucking good on that.
But here's what I found amazing in reading a little bit about each of you guys. Russ, I understand that before you played a note for Carole King, you asked her for a copy of the lyrics.
I don't know if it was before I played a note, but I remember asking for them because I just wanted to see, I wanted to look at them as I was playing the song down to kind of get a feeling for, because sometimes when you're playing music, you're not listening to the lyrics. You're kind of thinking about what you're playing, and you're making sure, for a drummer, you're making sure you're not in front or behind anybody.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just have an idea of what the songs were about.
Yeah.
And that stuck with her. She mentioned that somewhere along the way.
I mean, she's referred to you as the greatest singer-songwriter's drummer.
Well, that's very kind of her.
Yeah. And Lee, in looking into a little bit about your work, one of the things, look, there are lots of people who have chops, and lots of people who have technical skill, amazing technical skill, but you've talked about simplicity and kind of serving the song.
Well, I think collectively we're all of the same mind. It's all about the song. It's not showing, you're not there to impose yourself on the song and show off your chops and what you got. I mean, when I worked with Billy Cobham, I had to have those kind of chops for fusion. But when we would work with artists like James or Jackson, if it's a whole note, you play the best whole note that can be played at that point. It's not suddenly, this is demeaning because I'm not doing enough. And I think all of us really serve the song, and that's really the primary importance of all this. Now, when Russ mentioned You've Got a Friend, I think the first time we ever performed that was when we were out as a trio with James. And he came out on stage and he announced to the audience that this is a new song Carole King wrote, and we're going to perform it now for the first time. It was at King's College or something back. And he said, if you hear any mistakes, it's Lee. And so we played the song, and every bass note was wrong. And I would be damned if I was going to take a bullet for him under this. So I looked at him afterwards. I said, what song did we do before this? And he said, well, Country Road. I said, did you remember to tune back up? Because it was a drop D tuning, and he had forgotten to tune up. So every bass note, because James would play these really comprehensive bass parts in his playing, so he was a whole step off and everything, and I was not going to stand there and take it. It's my memory of You've Got a Friend.
First rule in session work, stick up for yourself. Right?
No, when you're talking about session work, there's so many things that come in. It's not just chops. It's really about how you relate to people. When you finish a track, you go in and you listen back, you talk about it. You're engaged as a player, and not just kind of sitting there saying, I played my part, now I'm gonna.
And you've talked about that, about going to a session, and sometimes the vibe in a session can be less than completely positive, but always being positive, always listening to the playback, kind of being engaged.
Yeah, it's absolutely important. There's the thing that to me has always been important about a session is that might be the only time that person you're recording for ever gets a shot. So you really have to give them your best shot. I'm maybe leaving that session, or any of us going to another session. Our job isn't going to end with that date, but their career can live or die by that date. So you give them, 100% of what you've got of them. It's like joining a band every day. You're not in Chili Peppers and that's all you do.
Yeah.
Every day you're in new bands, and you treat it like that.
And in doing that over a long period of time, each of you have become songwriters, producers, people who now not only do you play with great artists, but you guide them. And I'm wondering the experience. I'm assuming that the experience you've had working as a session player only feeds that ability to deal with the artist. You had a particular experience with Warren Zevon.
Yeah, well, like Danny spoke about Peter Asher. Peter Asher was a great influence in what you're supposed to be doing when you're producing a record. You're supposed to, first of all, above everything, make your artist feel like singing, because if the artist isn't going to be comfortable enough to sing, you have nothing going. It doesn't matter how good the band plays. But Peter would also make all of us feel needed, important, and you have to know how to do that. And Warren was a tough nut to crack, let's say. He was definitely putting up a fight.
Yeah.
But
what did Jackson say to you when he came to you to ask you to co-produce Excitable Boy?
Well, I did an interview when I was traveling with Linda in Europe, and I'd never been anywhere before. Well, Warren and I met with the Everly Brothers in 1970, and then after that, I was out with Linda, and someone approached me about Warren's record, the record that Jackson produced, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm so cool. I'm over here in England. I'm over here in France. No one's gonna read this. Who cares, So I said, what do you think of Jackson's work on Warren's record? I said, well, to tell you the truth, I think Jackson really had his hands way too full, and he didn't really know what he was doing, because Warren is, a nightmare to work with, and there were so many songs coming at you so fast, and so many guys in the studio, and he had his hands too full, basically. So, and I'm feeling really good about myself, and I get home, and the phone rings, and Jackson has never called me before. I just met him during that record, actually. So. And I pick up the phone. Hey, Waddy, it's Jackson. What? How are you, man? I said, I'm good. He goes, yeah, I know. I read your interview. I'm like, you what? I'm sorry, what? You read what? I read your interview, you know, the one that said I didn't know what I was doing and I had my hands too full. Oh, you did, huh? I said, well, he goes, you're right. You're absolutely right. He says, and that's why I'm calling you. I went, huh? He goes, I need you to co-produce the next record with me for one. And I went, you gotta be kidding. You don't even know me. He goes, I know you better than I know most people. Now I know where I stand with you. And he says, but the reason I need you there is because he won't listen to me now. You know, we did the one record, he won't listen to a word I say, but he'll listen to you right now. And believe me, that'll change after we do this record, which is exactly what happened. But, so that's how he brought me into it, and I was elated.
Yeah, and you know, that record, we could talk about specific records that each of you guys have played on and made. That record in particular, in kind of the run-up to this, I've been listening to it quite a bit. It just stands up. It stands up. It's remarkable. And you know, Danny, I have to go back just for a second because I know that you had expressed a desire when you were younger to be in a band, but not just any band. You were enamored of bands like Booker T and the MGs. You know, what was it about Booker T or you know, the dudes in Motown that interested you?
I was always drawn to, and I don't know why, but I was always drawn to the ensemble, the sound of the ensemble. I love the idea of a bunch of cats creating a groove and making something happen. And I love the idea of going to the studio every day with the same cats and tearing it up.
Yeah.
And those were the guys that really influenced me the most.
Yeah. And that seems to continue to happen.
I have a story about that that's kind of
Go ahead.
interesting because I came up a little at a different time. This was kind of over, but again, I took advantage of the fact, had the advantage that these guys' names were on the records that I listened to, so I knew who they were, and was now paying attention to who played the records. But I still was more focused on the songwriters and the singers, and I went to see a show that all these guys were on, and a James Taylor show. And I couldn't listen to James. I listened to what they were doing, and that's what taught me. That's why this is so exciting, is that was when I realized that night what the players are doing to make the song great. And I knew who they were because their names were on the record and I'd been paying attention.
Yeah. And riffing off of that a little bit, you know, the unfortunate fact is we're kind of in a moment here in music where those names get lost. You know, you were talking about how the Wrecking Crew never got, you know, kind of never got its due. Well, now we're in this position where, you know, streaming and all this stuff, and we don't see, you know, I know I have friends out here, my friends here tonight, and we spent hours poring over albums and liner notes and who played on it and where was it recorded and
They're not made that way anymore. That's the thing. You have people in different cities.
Yeah.
It's a completely different paradigm.
Yeah.
There's someone who does the drum track, then they send it off to someone who does this other part,
Mhm.
then there's someone in Nashville writes the melody, and someone writes the words. So it wouldn't even be that interesting to look at a liner note.
Yeah, but
That's when there's 52 writers on every song, though.
well, there is that. There is that, and at the risk, and I don't want to necessarily dwell on this, but at the risk of sounding like a bunch of old guys, which we all you know, God knows in August I will do it, but don't even go there. It's changed. The business of making music has changed. And I know Lee, you've talked about, you know, kind of, you know, what session dates are like now.
It's interesting because there are a lot of sessions that really harken back to what it was like then. We're in the like in real studios with 4 or 6 guys, girls, whoever, you know, the musicians are. The real problem is not really the music, it's the business. To me, that's the problem. I get calls from artists after we do their albums and they go, any ideas what we can do with this? Because first off, there's not a label, so they're either self-funded or somebody who's had dreams of being involved in music, who made money somewhere else is bankrolling it.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to what do you do with this? Nobody really has a clue what to do. So, when you're sitting there and you look on your website and you had, 1 million hits, if that was a dime each or a penny each, that would be a viable business. But you're really not. It's not monetizing.
Yeah.
It's also all these people are having to look for other work to pay their bills. It's a really strange time, and like you said, when it comes down to first off, I mean, everybody, you have almost 2 generations now that think music should be free.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
I do clinics for bass players,
Yeah.
and the first thing I ask is how many of you guys download? And they all raise their hand, and I go, so basically you're trying to go into a business that you're killing. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But it's a really difficult time, and like you said, the voyage of discovery is what's really been hurt. Like when I remember as a kid going to Wallach's Music City, and you're just going through those bins, and you'd find an album that had a cool art on it. You didn't know anything about it, but somehow it intrigued you. And you could look and see all these names, and there were records that I bought because I saw names on them of guys, that I recognized they're playing on it. And I go, this has got to be cool. He's, Leon Russell's on it. It's got to be great. Well, now you can't find that.
You could go into a booth and play the record.
And you could go in and preview it. But now, when you're streaming, you don't see any credits. You don't see any. There's no album art.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, for me, my personal mantra has always been, don't become an old fart. Because I like working, and I don't want to give up working. So you don't really whine about this stuff. But it's really a drag because there really was a heyday that this was all really magical. And,
By the way, I'd be glad to whine about it if I could.
Go ahead.
Which is very simple, that so many records are made piecemeal now. As Leland was saying, one guy at a time. Then it's all put through the deflavorizing machine, so that it's also corrected and so moved and so on the dime, so whacked to the grid, as it were.
Yeah.
That you don't have any. There's no blood at all. There's no blood and guts, and it's not as soulful. Soulful comes from people. It doesn't come from this manufactured stuff.
So what do you guys tell young musicians? Because I'm sure you come in contact. I'm sure you go to NAMM. You do clinics and workshops. All of you guys. What do you tell young musicians?
It's tough, because I work with a lot of young musicians that teach, but also in production, and it's very hard to be positive about, because even all of us had these when we came up and when I came up, even though it was a little after, but not that much. If you were reasonably good, you worked every day. There was at night you played in the club, you got paid for it. There was studios, so by the time after a few years you had a lot of experience, and you can't. There's no way to jumpstart that. You can't just get good. You can sit home and practice, not the same thing.
Yeah.
So what's difficult now is the opportunities are so few. Like literally growing in New York City, every night you could play. And every day, all day long. It was a different kind of studio session. By the time I came into it, it was more movies and TV and jingles. But I was in the studio all day, every day. And it doesn't exist for them. So I guess you try to impress upon them, play with people. I say, make your own sessions. You gotta. There is no shortcut to playing.
Yeah.
So I had the pleasure of seeing a little short preview of a Steve Martin masterclass, and his answer to that question is the best one I've ever heard. When someone asked him, so as a young musician, what advice can you give me? And he said, you gotta be good.
That's it.
When I've done, I don't do a lot of clinics and master classes, but the ones I've done, it's really hard to temper reality with what's going on, but you also don't want to discourage them, because in that room could be somebody who could change the world. You just don't know. So I always tell them, I said, it's kind of like Powerball. They say, your odds of winning are 175 million to 1, but the next day on TV, there's some knucklehead holding this big check. And they won. So somebody in that room, or or a couple people might actually
Might
succeed in business, but the odds of you being able to actually have this be your career is really difficult. But I work with a lot of different people now who have had success in other businesses and come back to music because they're financially set and they still are good artists, so they end up doing it that way.
Yeah.
But that's rare too. But it's a difficult time. You really don't want to discourage people, but you do want to give, like MI and Llama and all these schools, the one thing they don't teach is you graduated on Friday, what are you facing Monday?
What do you do?
Yeah, they're just collecting their check for your being a student there, but you suddenly come out of there with all these skills and chops and all this stuff, and there's nothing going on for you unless you as he said, just kind of network and meet people and try to put a band together and do things.
Right.
It's a tough time. It's
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah, and there's, as I said, when you guys came up, there was this community sense, and I don't mean to overplay that, but it was really the case.
Well, there was enough work where there wasn't like any kind of pettiness. You covet it. It's not like coveting your work there and not wanting to share it. Everybody was so giving, and it was such a community.
Yeah.
It was fabulous.
And I assume it was the same for you guys, but you had to have other people, because you had to have subs. It's like, if I was playing a Broadway show, I had 6 guys who, they had to be friends of mine, because if I had a session, you play the show, I'll do the
I'll
show.
go do this, yeah.
So it was naturally beneficial to be a community.
You know, we had the benefit as well of Peter Asher, once again, our great mentor. Not only would he hire us to play in the studio with all these great artists, but he made sure that we toured with them. So we went from the studio out on the road. So we had the benefit of not only earning a living from being in the studio, but also from working on the road. And that just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. So it's one thing to be in the studio and playing down songs and making sure they sound as good as you can make them. It's another thing entirely when you start to take it out on the road. Talk a little bit about kind of that transition, if you will, from having been guys in the studio to okay, now I'm out on tour playing for audiences, and you kind of get one shot to impress the group. Does that change your mindset at all? Are there things you need to do differently?
Well, we kind of grew up doing those things. I mean, but when we started going on the road with James and Carole and Jackson, we were just learning how to do that ourselves. I mean, we had played live before, but not in front of 3,000 people. So it's a different mindset. You're performing live in front of people. You only have one shot to do each song. So you have to be right on the money.
Yeah. So fair warning, we're going to ask for a couple questions from the house here in just a minute. And this may be a difficult question to answer, but thousands of sessions, thousands of records released. For each of you, is there a moment that stands out? Is there a moment in the studio, on stage, and it could be ridiculous or it could be sublime, that stands out for you as, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was there?
I think for each of us, there's probably a lot of those moments. They just all of a sudden happen. And one of the first ones that for me I can remember, aside from when Nick and A jetted me into the world of Lou Adler and my brothers here. Peter Asher, he's a very warm guy, but he was also very distant if you weren't in the circle. And I wasn't in the circle. He didn't know who I was. He didn't care who I was. And I stopped by the studio one night to say hello to J.D. Souter, who was my good friend. And they were recording, and J.D. says, "Oh man, it's great you're here. You got to play on this record." And I saw Peter just go, "Oh no," bite his lip, "Oh man, get this guy out of here." And I grabbed my guitar and sat down, and it was J.D.'s song "Simple Man, Simple Dreams." And as the song started, I heard it start, and I realized I know what to play in this little spot. As soon as he stopped singing, I know what to.
Don, I think, realized at that point he was going to have to do something. He was going to make a solo album. So he started calling everyone in LA, all the cats, everyone he knew, to come up to his band and jam with him. And I knew the phone was going to ring. I knew the phone was going to ring, and I knew that if I did go up there, I was going to get the gig. I just knew it. And sure enough, that's what happened. I went up there, and I played him a few ideas that I had. And he said, "Oh, you want to make this album with me?" I said, "Yeah." And we started hitting it off right away. And Henley and I would sit around. First of all, we would discuss what he wanted to say and what he wanted to write about it. And then I would go home and start making demos and working up stuff. You play him a demo, he goes, "I can sing to that." That means we're going to record it. We're going to start recording it. So that was an incredible situation. Also, the fact there was no budget, there was no constraints of any kind. There was nobody telling us, "You got to do this, you got to do that." And any piece of gear, for instance, that we wanted, Don would turn to his aide-de-camp, Tony Tate, and say, "Tony, get it." Like we heard about a DX7, this Yamaha DX7, and get one. 2 days later, the first DX7 in the United States shows up at the studio. Stuff like that. So that was a brilliant thing. And also, just working with a cat that had so much to say and was such an incredible singer, that's Donna. It was unbelievable to work with somebody, to have that much input into a project with a guy that had that much to say and was so good at saying. So that was a standout.
And for him, it seems as though if he could sing it, if it's something he could grab onto vocally, that was it.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wait.
As far as live work goes, one of the most exhilarating moments to me still, and it happens every time we do it, in all the years I've been working with Phil Collins, every time that Phil comes up in the air tonight, we just finished playing South America, and we were doing 60,000 people a night in the stadium, and you see all these arms come up to do an air fill. And it's just like we all look at each other and get goosebumps every time that the tension builds up to that. But in the studio, for me, it's like these weird little projects to me that are the ones. I did 2 albums with Andy Griffith, and he won a Grammy for the first one. It was contemporary gospel. Because he loved that, and he had his guitar that he played on the Andy Griffith show. And I'm sitting there in the studio, and I'm just looking next to me. My wife's here tonight; she was there too. But I'm just finding myself pinching myself. Going, Andy Griffith. I could have cared less if I was into Peter Gabriel or anybody else. Andy Griffith is sitting right next to me. To me, that's one of the most exciting things about the studio. It's all these little things that happen in that. It's a really interesting road to have traveled with all these different artists.
Was Andy doing a lot of blow at that time?
He was I'll tell you, the best quote that came out of that session was, Andy, this was like after Matlock, he had this beautiful thick white hair, and he looked at me and he said, "Who would have thought I'd have all this hair and Opie be bald?"
I have no idea how to follow that. So we got time for a question or two from the house. Yes, first hand I saw right there.
How often were you guys given charts telling you exactly what to play versus just make something up? And which did you prefer?
In my case, it was I could read pretty well when I was 17 or 18, but I lost the ability to read because I was only hired to be myself. I was only hired to play stuff I already played, and it was hard to have. They wanted that style, whatever style it is, and so I would basically only be reading rhythm charts. That's not true with Leland, though. Who can read fly shit, as the expression.
Some of it is.
Yes. Yeah, right there.
Every time you left the session, how often did you get the feelings that that's going to be a hit? Could you tell?
Yeah. Did you know it was a hit?
There are some times where you could walk out, and I looked at the producer of Betty Davis Eyes after we cut that track, and I said, "I guarantee you this is a smash." And it was, because it just reeked of it. And everything on that record is live. Every sound, every vocal that Kim sang, everything went down at once. And it was mixed by our dear friend Nico Bolas. Did a rough, what they call a monitor mix that night in the studio, when the headphone mix was the mix. And as the time went by and they tried to remix it, they could never better it. So the mix that went out was the same rough mix from the night we cut it. But yeah, there are times you know it's going to be a smash.
And how often that you know, I hear that story so often that the rough mix, the demo, the first kind of pass through where all the emotion and all and really maybe you're not absolutely certain of the song, but that's what ends up.
Sometimes, yeah, it's a thing that session players, we wind up calling it demo love, where you walk in the studio and people want to. You play them the song, you get an idea. They go, no, listen to the demo. Well, why don't you just use the demo? Because a lot of times they can't get away from it. I understand it. And it's a thing you get used to hearing. What you bring in, and you're afraid to move away from it.
Who else? Yes.
I think there are probably a lot of people in the theater that are liner notes readers. And I know growing up and reading Warren Zevon liner notes, that's how I got to know all you guys and following you from session to session. It's so great to see you all together and enjoying each other. Sometimes we see people here that look like they want to strangle each other. You guys are sincerely having a good time.
That would not be me. Not me.
Who would be some artists that you could mention that are maybe unsung heroes that you learned about as music nuts growing up?
Or people you came across in the studio that perhaps are not as well known.
Well, Waddy.
Okay, there we go. We got time for one more. Way in the back. Yes, hi.
Who would you like to work with that you haven't had the opportunity to do so?
Oh, good. Who do you want to work with?
Russ got to work with him, but I never did, and I'm such a huge fan. I never got to work with Winwood.
Here, here.
That's a good one.
Here, here.
That's Peter Gabriel. Love Peter Gabriel.
Gabriel. Yeah, that's a good one too. But look, here's what I know. I am so pleased that you guys took the time to come down and do But the time for talking is through. We want to hear you play. So, ladies and gentlemen, Leland Sklar, Danny Kortchmar, Russ Kunkel, Waddy Wachtel, Steve Postell, the immediate family band. Come on.
Ladies and gentlemen, Waddy Wachtel.
Don't know nothing about it, Central. been taken to the laughter. If it's money that she's after, then we're heading for disaster. Even sooner than I thought. Baby, got me rocking and I'm reeling. Yes, I'm paying for the feeling. She's only going through the motions. People floating in the ocean. But she's the high maintenance girlfriend now. She's the high maintenance girlfriend now. Hey, she's the high maintenance girlfriend now. Hey, she's the high maintenance girlfriend now.
Thank you very much.
So they were talking about the Don Henley, the wonderful Don Henley records that Danny worked on and produced. He also wrote a lot of the songs on those records, which some people don't know. And this is one of my favorite, and I get to sing it. By the way, we're so glad to be here. We're gonna have to take a little break while some of the guys have to go on tour. But we have 2 more shows on Sunday. I just wanted to let you know. And there's 9 tickets left for one and 8 for the other. And there's bogeys on Sunday. So if anybody, as soon as the show's over, go online and try to get the last show ticket before they sell out. That's bogeys on Sunday. That's in Westlake Village. And there's 17 tickets left between the 2 shows. It's in my living room.
I was just saying, that's a good show, we should go see that. Okay, here's a tune that I wrote that James Taylor recorded a long time ago on his Mudslide Slim album. And we do it different than James, needless to say. So I'm gonna give it to you right now, Machine Gun Kelly.
I'm going to do a song for you that I wrote with Warren.
Yeah.
And, so we need your help on the choruses, everybody. I think you might know this song. And I sure need a bunch of werewolves to chime in on this. Okay?
Bless you, Brother Warren. We miss you fucking there.
To see some of you Sunday. We'll be back in the fall with lots more and a new record.
Nice.
Thank you so much for being here. We got one more song for you. It's Waddy Wachtel. That's Danny Kortchmar. Russ Kunkel. Leland Sklar, everybody.
And the new boy, Kieth Richards, ladies and gentlemen.
The new boy. With the immediate family. Thank you so much.
guys.
Thank you so much. Want to see 16 of you on Sunday. 16 people.